Good morning, very early morning. Welcome to Tux TV. I'm your host, Jimmy Tux, and I have a little interruption of sleep. So, when I first clicked on something, it bothered me enough to come online. I don't expect too many of you, so I'm not going to put the chat out. I'm not going to interact with the chat. I'm just going to say what I got to say. And I'm going to, more or less just say my piece and go forward. But I do have, I do have somebody watching. Hey, thank you for showing up. Hopefully you're in the UK and this is a normal time of day for you. All right, let's get the program. Gurr has said this about William Lane Craig. So I want to poison the well. Full disclosure, I want to poison the well with the words of Gurr Mania, his opinion, and basically using or weaponizing Bill's words against Bill.
Suddenly, all the arguments against God were refuted. I'd be open to changing my position. I don't believe in God, but unlike Bill, I'm open to being wrong. I'm open to being a theist, but Bill isn't open to being an atheist. Personally, I try my best to follow the evidence regardless of liking the answer or not. If I hold a position or opinion that is wrong, I want to know so I can change. In the immortal words of Matt Dillahunty, I want to believe in as many true things and as few false things as possible.
Bill continues.
In the absence of some argument for the truth of atheism, I can be perfectly rational to believe in God on the basis of the Spirit's witness. What I'm claiming is that even in the face of evidence against God, which we cannot refute, we ought to believe in God on the basis of His Spirit's witness.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Okay, so love that clip. Gurr did a great job mixing basically the word salad of William Lane Craig. So today we're going to do basically the same thing. We're going to look at a part one from Apologetics in Academia. This is a critique of Derek Lambert and Apologia video that it was done, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago. I actually saw part two before I saw part one, and I saw part one this morning, and here I go.
To one of our podcasts to do so. Apologia had Derek Lambert of the Myth Vision podcast talk about your response to Dr. Richard Miller on how Christian apologists are disdained in the upper echelons of scholarship. Now, listeners can review that podcast that we did. It's called Responding to YouTube Critics, reasonablefaith.org. So let's start with a clip of them taking me to task for one of my comments. Well, Bill, I couldn't
So this is Kevin Harris, who was just speaking there.
resist, and I accused him in the comments of that video when I saw it of doing apologetics against apologetics.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, your gosh. Oh, your gosh.
Okay, if we're going to be technical on the definition of apologist, it's simply a person who offers an argument in defense of something controversial, according to, Dictionary Online, Oxford. But we all know what an apologist is. Okay, this is someone who literally makes it their duty to defend their particular faith view. And we don't need to get into, is atheism some type of worldview, and is this something that we need to defend? That's irrelevant to me. You can be agnostic, you can be theist, you can be atheist, you can be whatever you want. But what they're doing is starting with their answer, just like you had to sign your faith waiver in order to even go to these schools. They're not starting with the question. And this is the investigation that is against the methodology Richard and those ivory tower scholars I bring on my show, and you've been bringing on yours, Paul. They want the questions. They don't scratch the answers. The answers come after you've investigated.
By the way, I felt like I should apologize to Dr. Miller, so I did so in the comments section of this particular video for what could be construed as a cheap debater's trick, saying he's doing apologetics against apologetics. And he responded, Bill was very gracious and agreed that terms need to be defined. So
Yes.
let's take it from there.
All right. Now, let me poison the well even more to go back to Gur's statement. We are about to see a 6.5-minute word salad. And down in the comments here, there is a comment that says some variation of, "It is amazing. My gut reaction was that there was something ad hominem about the young fellow's objections, something unduly sarcastic in tone. Bill's response seemed clear and more than adequate." So, is Gur correct here in that?
The answer or not. If I hold a position or opinion that is
I went back too far.
wrong, I want to know so I can change.
How
In
come?
the immortal words of Matt Dillahunty,
What's going on here?
I want to believe in its. In the absence of some argument for the truth of atheism, I can be perfectly rational to believe in God on the basis of the Spirit's witness. What I'm claiming is that even in the face of evidence against God, which we cannot refute, we ought to believe in God on the basis
I don't know why,
of the
but my
Spirit's
computer is messing
witness.
up right now. Hang on.
What you just idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Okay. So, let's go to another friend of the show. This is from Illinois. I want to show, he does a video called William Lane Craig, A Con Man for Christ. This is his introduction to the video.
It's always nice when someone smart and well-spoken agrees with your position. It gives you confidence that you've thought about the issues correctly, even if the well-spoken person hasn't actually said anything substantial.
Okay. So, let's go to William Lane Craig here.
Text of our discussion. So,
Be gracious from there.
well, let's review and take a step back so that our listeners today understand the context of our discussion. Miller had made basically 2 points by way of criticism of Christian apologetics. First of all, he said that Christian apologists are inconsequential in academia, and that scholars generally either are unaware of their work or simply choose to ignore their work.
Okay.
His second
Let's go back to our friend here and see what he keeps saying about Paul, about our Bill.
In this respect, William Lane Craig is a con man. Con, of course, being short for confidence. When people ask him tough questions about Christianity,
I know what the
delivers
problem
practical-
is. Oh, I had to turn on Wi-Fi. That's what the problem is. Hang on a second. We might lose the stream. Might have to start over. Hopefully I'm still on.
just answers in a calmly arrogant tone, which makes people feel protected and reassured. But when you rewind the tape and think about what he actually said, you realize that his answers don't really solve anything, and many of them simply raise even more questions.
Okay, let's see. Let's see if that's true. Does he keep? I'm going to let him keep going here.
is irreparably flawed because you begin with the position that you think is true and want to defend, and then you develop your arguments for it. And we responded to both of those charges. With respect to the first, I actually agreed with Miller
Perfect. So, took him a full minute to get to that point.
that Christian apologists are
Scratch that. Let's go back to our friend here.
It's not an exercise in doing good philosophy. It's an exercise in projecting confidence. As I was looking for reference material for another video, I realized that William Lane Craig makes a habit of answering challenges to Christianity in the most simplistic and ad hoc ways I've seen from any apologist. Were it not for his...
Let's see if that's true. Man, everything is glitchy. I don't know why.
Are popularizers. They do not have earned doctorates. They do not publish in peer-reviewed journals or with academic presses. They don't read papers at professional conferences. Rather, their role is to take material down out of the ivory tower and to make it accessible to the man in the street. And as such, they perform an indispensable cultural function in making this material available to the average person. And I said that this underlines the importance of bona fide Christian scholarship, which is comparable to the top echelons of secular academic scholarship today. And I named some specific people, particularly at the institutions at which Miller himself had studied and of whom he seemed to be unaware, like Robert Adams and Nicholas Wolterstorff at Yale, as well as...
Okay. Is there anything there that I'm missing that is answering the actual question, the direct question at hand? He already agreed with the first point, and now he's name dropping. He's basically said a bunch of words. So let's go back to my friend here at Villanite.
Polished delivery, I honestly don't think anyone would take this man seriously. If you know someone who relies on William Lane Craig for reassurance that Christianity is true, if they feel confident in their conclusions because William Lane Craig has done the legwork, this video is for that person.
This video is going to be in the description. It really goes into whether or not William Lane Craig is a huckster or not. And in my opinion, he lays out a very good point that not only is William Lane Craig telling you these word salads all the time, but sometimes the way he delivers it, it's almost like he knows that he's getting away with it. So, to demonstrate that this is a word salad, I've instead of playing William in William's voice, instead of playing the entirety of that 6 minutes, I have dyslexia. So I have a reading assistant on my phone. Anytime I'm struggling to read something, I just play it, put an earbud in, and I play it. So I took the transcript from this video, I put it in, click the button, and listen to it, just to see if my general disdain's maybe a harsher word than necessary, but the disdain for somebody who I don't believe is honest in the first place. I think he's selling a bill of goods. He's a little bit of a grifter here. I think he's doing this for honest reasons, but I do believe he's plugged his ears, looked the other way, as Germania has pointed out, and just going la, 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 and ignores the things that are, to me, obvious in the Christian world as false and perpetuating that false information. So let's go with that. Share this. I'm going to put this up instead.
Listeners today, understand the context of our discussion. Miller had made basically 2 points by way of criticism of Christian Apologetics. First of all, he said that Christian apologists are inconsequential in academia and that scholars generally either are unaware of their work or simply choose to ignore their work. His second point was that the methodology of apologetics is irreparably flawed because you begin with the position that you think is true and want to defend, and then you develop your arguments for it. And we responded to both of those charges. With respect to the first, I actually agreed with Miller that Christian apologists are generally not academics or scholars. Most Christian apologists today are popularizers. They do not have earned doctorates. They do not publish in peer-reviewed journals or with academic presses. They don't read papers at professional conferences. Rather, their role is to take material down out of the ivory tower and to make it accessible to the man in the street, and as such they perform an indispensable cultural function in making this material available to the average person. And I said that this underlines the importance of bona fide Christian scholarship, which is comparable to the top echelons of secular academic scholarship today. And I named some specific people, particularly at the institutions at which Miller himself had studied and of whom he seemed to be unaware, like Robert Adams and Nicholas Weylersdorf at Yale, as well as Stephen Davis at Claremont, and a number of other of these top scholars. And these scholars are second to none in terms of their scholarly credentials and the scholarship that's exemplified in their work. Now, as to the second point concerning the methodology of apologetics, what I argued is that there is absolutely nothing objectionable with stating the view that you've arrived at and then seeking to give a defense of that view. And I thought it was tremendously ironic. I see that the definition that these two fellas put up on the screen of their video says that an apologist is someone who tries to explain or defend something, especially a political system or religious ideas. And then two of the examples that were given were both secular. For example, apologists for nuclear power and apologalists for hardline government policies. So it is not at all true that apologetics is necessarily defending a faith-based position. After you've investigated and arrived at a position, you can then write a book seeking to explain and defend those ideas. And I gave some examples of this. For instance, Jerry Coyne's book Why Evolution is True. This is an apologetic for contemporary neo-Darwinian evolutionary theory. Here's a couple of more examples I found on my shelf. Timothy Williamson's Modal Logic as Metaphysics. Williamson is a professor at Oxford University, and he holds to a philosophy called necessitism, which holds that everything that exists necessarily, and this book is his explication and defense of the philosophy of necessitism. Or here's another one, James Franklin's book, An Aristotelian Realist Philosophy of Mathematics. In this book, Franklin seeks to explain and defend an Aristotelian perspective on philosophy of mathematics, which represents his preferred view. And so there's nothing at all unusual or flawed about laying out your view and then seeking to give a defense of it. And I can say in my own work, my defense of the column cosmological argument was the result of extensive research on that argument before I arrived at my views. On notice that being a Christian doesn't commit you to the coney of the column cosmological argument or to the soundness of the ontological argument or the fine-tuning argument. In fact, the irony here, Kevin, is that I can be far more objective in my assessment of these arguments than these two fellows can, because my belief in God doesn't depend upon the soundness of the column cosmological argument or the ontological argument. There are many Christians who don't accept those particular arguments. They might have other reasons for believing in God, but for these two fellows, their worldview stands or falls with these arguments. If they were to admit that the column cosmological argument or the fine-tuning argument is a sound argument, then it's over. They've got to change their worldview. So you see, there's a lot more hanging on these arguments for them than there is for me. I can afford to be completely objective and open-minded about the assessment of these arguments, because being a Christie doesn't entail the soundness of any particular natural theological argument or a Christian evidence. Bill, I'm jumping ahead just a little bit here, but I think now it would be a good time to even emphasize this more, because in all these years of Don't podcast with you, one thing that has...
Okay. Let's join this again.
Jumping ahead just a little bit here, but I think now it would be a good time to even emphasize this more, because in all these years of doing podcast with you, one thing that has...
So, this is what I know. Bill started talking about 2 minutes, 12 seconds, and he stopped talking at 8 minutes and 35 seconds. And that is what he said. Shortened it down a little bit to around 4.5 minutes on the audio instead of playing the video. But did you hear what he said? in my opinion, all he said was a word salad. He said literally nothing and name dropped a whole bunch of authors, I mean. That's it. That's it. So, what are we missing here? What if we are in a situation in this world where Christianity is true, and William Lane Craig is the best forebearer of that Christianity and his philosophical arguments, this is the best Christianity has to offer in apologetics and philosophical arguments to defend the faith. How do we combat basic nonsense to this degree? Here's the beauty. I am such a stupid person. I'm the dumbest person in the room just about any time. And William Lane Craig is probably the smartest person in the room anytime he's in that room. I must be a freaking idiot to think how much smarter I am than Bill Craig. How come I see the scam and nobody else does? Maybe not nobody else, but the majority of the world. Is it because my heart is hardened? Or do I really see a scam artist in front of me, spilling out a bunch of words that sound great to the Christian ear, but failed on every level to demonstrate with his philosophical argument that it's his God. That it's his God. Nobody else's. I am absolutely blown away by 6 minutes of nonsense in response to a video where Dr. Miller is basically accused of being the apologist. I don't get it. I honestly don't get it. I'd love to just pull up the Bowtie 8 and say, hey, Bill, this is what we need to see. We need to see that there are these beings, these entities right here, that they exist. And I personally need to see, if you do demonstrate that one of those things exists, I personally need to see that there isn't a bad guy who's in cahoots with these good guys, quote unquote. And that's it. That's all you need. You don't need to throw us 6 minutes of nothing. Sounds good, sounds important. Boil it down to its ultimate conclusion. It's just one run-on sentence of nothing. And some name droppings. Word salad with a delicious array of dressing name drop. That's it. End of list. In part 2, I thought about doing a video, but in part 2, they really go into how bankrupt you can be if you don't pay attention to certain apologists. And one of the apologists he drops is N.T. Wright. And I find it fascinating. N.T. Wright is a reliable source. N.T. Wright just always sells the sizzle and never the steak. It is a constant description about something just to make you feel, to draw out emotions. Those emotions are usually surrounded about some sort of hearty dose of crucifixion, hearty dose of emotion, that how much the emotional attachment of praying in the Garden of Gethsemane is. All the while not providing evidence that there was an actual God who could sweat blood. That his love and beloved notions of how great Romans is. It is very difficult to hear William Lane Craig say nothing for 6 minutes. In fact, I'm purposely trying to extend saying nothing for 6 minutes. I think William Lane Craig could do better. I don't understand how Kevin Harris and William Lane Craig can look into their cameras and talk as they do on faith alone any longer. It's time to put up the evidence that William Lane Craig has a substance to talk about, to bring forth, that he's not perpetuating dishonesty. I don't care if he had the feels back whenever he had the feels. I don't care. Don't justify it by doing word salads for 6 minutes at a time and saying nothing and dropping a couple of authors. Doesn't do anything for me. Jesus being a God, that's important to me. Dismissing handily that human deceivers didn't orchestrate some sort of authorship of a book. That it is actually something that was in the first century, that was recording history. That it wasn't a con man like Paul, a con man like Peter. And it's that simple. That's all I need. And so far, William Lane Craig hasn't produced it. And shame on him. Well, I'm tired of talking about William Lane Craig. Here is your moment of Zen.